The termination letter arrived on a Friday at 4:47 p.m., delivered by courier to ensure I received it before the weekend when I couldn't respond through official channels. Due to restructuring requirements, your position as Chief Financial Officer has been eliminated effective immediately. We appreciate your contributions and wish you success in future endeavors. 8 years of building Meridian Technologies into a $50 million enterprise, reduced to 3 sentences and a security escort to the parking garage. My name is Caroline Matthews, and for 8 years, I'd been the financial architect behind my husband's technology consulting firm. While Marcus charmed clients and pitched innovative solutions, I'd been the strategic mind managing cash flow, structuring contracts, and building the financial systems that transformed his startup dreams into sustainable profit. What Marcus had forgotten when he decided to eliminate my position was that I wasn't just his chief financial officer. I was the person who understood every financial detail, every client vulnerability, and every regulatory requirement that kept Meridian Technologies profitable and compliant. His just business decision was about to become very personal when he discovered what happened when you fired someone who knew exactly where all the financial bodies were buried. Marcus thought he could remove me from his company to make room for his new business partner, both professional and personal, while keeping the financial infrastructure I'd built. What he was about to learn was that some business decisions have consequences that extend far beyond restructuring charts, especially when you terminate someone who'd spent 8 years ensuring your company operated legally. Picture this: a glass-walled conference room in Austin's tech corridor where Marcus and I had built Meridian Technologies from a 2-person startup into one of the region's most successful technology consulting firms. We specialized in digital transformation for mid-market companies, which meant we understood exactly how businesses could be systematically modernized or systematically destroyed. My role as CFO went far beyond traditional financial management. I'd designed the contract structures that protected our intellectual property, implemented the compliance systems that satisfied regulatory requirements, and built the financial controls that prevented the kind of fraud and mismanagement that destroyed consulting firms. Mr. Peterson, the implementation timeline we're proposing includes built-in safeguards that protect both your data integrity and your competitive position, I'd explained to clients who needed comprehensive digital overhauls. Our financial modeling shows ROI achievement within 18 months, assuming adherence to the governance frameworks we've established. I'd been so focused on protecting our clients' businesses that I'd failed to protect myself from my own business partner. Meridian Technologies had earned its reputation on delivering complex transformations that other consulting firms couldn't handle. We'd developed proprietary methodologies for data migration, custom software that streamlined business processes, and financial models that helped companies optimize everything from supply chain management to customer acquisition. "Caroline, you're the genius behind our profitability," Marcus would tell me during our strategic planning sessions. "I can sell the vision and manage client relationships, but you make the numbers work. You make everything possible." Everything except honesty in our partnership. The first indication that our perfect partnership was evolving came 6 months ago when Marcus hired Elena Rodriguez as our Director of Business Development. Fresh from a major consulting firm, ambitious, and eager to bring fresh perspectives to client acquisition and strategic planning. "Caroline, I've been reviewing our client contracts and financial structures. There might be opportunities to optimize our profit margins by restructuring some of these arrangements. I'd love to collaborate on some new approaches." What Elena didn't understand was that our contract structures and financial arrangements had been carefully designed to balance profitability with regulatory compliance and client protection. Her optimization suggestions consistently prioritized short-term revenue over long-term sustainability. Over the following months, Marcus started including Elena in financial planning discussions that had previously been private conversations between partners. She'd take notes while I explained cash flow management and contract analysis, absorbing methodologies she assumed were standard industry practices rather than proprietary systems I'd developed. Then came the strategic planning retreat, where Marcus and Elena would spend weekends at resort locations discussing future vision and growth strategies, while I maintained client relationships and handled operational requirements in Austin. But here's the thing about being a CFO who specializes in financial analysis. You develop instincts about when expense patterns suggest activities that aren't aligned with stated business purposes. When your business partner starts charging personal travel as strategic planning while excluding you from those planning sessions, you start applying the same analytical frameworks you use for detecting client fraud. I began documenting Marcus and Elena's activities with the same thoroughness I applied when conducting financial audits for clients suspected of embezzlement or mismanagement. What I discovered wasn't just evidence of an affair. It was evidence of systematic financial manipulation that was preparing Elena to replace me while gaining access to proprietary business systems. The beautiful thing about being a CFO is understanding exactly how financial deception works and what evidence trails people leave when they think their activities are hidden from oversight. Marcus and Elena thought they were conducting discreet strategic planning while gradually transitioning my responsibilities to her. What they were actually doing was creating a comprehensive audit trail of systematic business fraud. I started with basic expense analysis, using the forensic accounting techniques I'd developed for investigating client financial irregularities. Marcus's business expenses over the past 6 months painted a clear picture of relationship development that had nothing to do with legitimate business planning. Hotel charges for 2 during supposed solo client meetings, restaurant expenses for extended dinners that exceeded any reasonable business purpose, travel costs for destinations that didn't correspond with any current client contracts or business opportunities. But Marcus's personal financial deception was just the surface of a much more serious problem. Using my administrative access to our business systems, I discovered that Elena had been systematically copying financial data, client information, and proprietary methodologies into files labeled BD Strategic Analysis. She wasn't just learning our business development approaches, she was documenting every aspect of our financial operations, client relationships, and competitive advantages. Everything I'd built over 8 years was being packaged for transfer to someone who'd been with the company for 6 months. The smoking gun was a draft business plan I found in Elena's shared drive folder. Rodriguez Consulting Solutions, Market Entry Strategy. The plan outlined launching a competing firm using proven methodologies and established client relationships while targeting opportunities in the mid-market digital transformation space. Sound of systematic investigation. Marcus and Elena weren't just planning to replace me personally and professionally. They were planning to steal proprietary business assets, client relationships, and financial systems while positioning their new firm as the natural evolution of Meridian Technologies' success. Using corporate investigation techniques I'd learned during regulatory compliance training, I began mapping Elena's professional network, business connections, and potential funding sources for her planned consulting firm. What I discovered was that she'd been recruited specifically for this purpose, not as our business development director, but as a corporate spy conducting systematic intellectual property theft. Elena's previous employer was Data Sync Solutions, a consulting firm that specialized in aggressive market entry strategies and competitive acquisition. Her real role at Meridian wasn't business development. It was intelligence gathering for a planned market takeover that would utilize our proprietary systems and client relationships. Marcus thought he could replace his wife and business partner with someone younger and more ambitious while keeping the financial empire I'd helped build. What he was about to learn was that some terminations require more than a courier-delivered letter, especially when you fire someone who understands every aspect of your business operations and regulatory compliance. Elena and Marcus had spent months planning my professional elimination while stealing the intellectual property that made their new venture possible. Now I was going to demonstrate exactly what happened when you terminated someone who understood how to systematically dismantle the business systems they'd spent 8 years building. The beauty of being a CFO who'd spent 8 years ensuring regulatory compliance is understanding exactly which violations could shut down a business immediately and which agencies had the authority to investigate systematic financial fraud. Marcus and Elena were about to receive the most comprehensive compliance audit of their careers. Sound of systematic documentation. I spent my weekend of elimination compiling a case file that would have impressed any regulatory auditor. Every financial irregularity I'd discovered, every compliance violation I'd previously corrected, and every system weakness that I'd been protecting through careful management. All documented with the precision of someone who understood exactly how government investigations worked. Marcus had been so confident in my loyalty and discretion that he'd never implemented financial controls that would prevent a CFO from accessing historical data or documenting systematic problems. I had complete access to 8 years of financial records, contract disputes, and client relationship management that revealed patterns of problems I'd been quietly solving. What I discovered was that Meridian Technologies had been operating in systematic violation of several federal regulations governing data privacy, financial reporting, and competitive practices. Problems I'd been managing through careful compliance protocols were actually violations that could trigger immediate suspension of our business licenses. The SEC violations alone were staggering. Marcus had been categorizing personal expenses as business costs, misrepresenting revenue timing to optimize tax implications, and manipulating financial statements to qualify for business loans that exceeded our actual capacity. I'd been preventing audit triggers through careful financial management, but the underlying violations remained. Then there were the data privacy violations. Our client contracts included strict confidentiality requirements that were governed by federal regulations. But Marcus had been sharing client information with Elena before she'd completed background screening or signed appropriate NDAs. Every strategic planning session where they discussed client data represented a potential HIPAA or SOX violation. But the most devastating discoveries involved Elena's systematic intellectual property theft. Her documentation of our proprietary methodologies while planning a competing business constituted corporate espionage, violation of fiduciary duty, and potential criminal conspiracy to defraud business partners. Monday morning, I began filing the most comprehensive regulatory complaint in Meridian Technologies' history. Not as a terminated employee seeking revenge, but as a former CFO with legal obligations to report financial fraud and regulatory violations that threatened client interests and federal compliance requirements. This is Caroline Matthews, former CFO of Meridian Technologies. I need to report systematic financial violations and potential corporate espionage that require immediate regulatory investigation. The response was immediate and comprehensive. The SEC opened a financial fraud investigation based on my documentation of expense manipulation and revenue misrepresentation. The FTC initiated a data privacy audit based on evidence of client information sharing with unauthorized personnel. The Texas Department of Licensing began investigating corporate structure violations that could revoke our business permits. Marcus thought he could eliminate my position while keeping the financial systems I'd built operational. What he was discovering was that those systems had been protecting him from regulatory scrutiny that would now examine every aspect of his business operations without my careful compliance management. Elena's intellectual property theft had triggered a criminal investigation for corporate espionage. Her planned consulting firm was now evidence in a federal case that would prevent her from using any methodologies or client relationships she'd stolen from Meridian. By Wednesday, Meridian Technologies was facing regulatory audits from 4 different agencies: criminal investigation for corporate espionage, and immediate suspension of business licenses pending compliance review. The $50 million enterprise I'd helped build was discovering exactly what happened when regulatory protection was removed by someone who understood every vulnerability. Thursday morning brought federal agents to Meridian Technologies' offices, armed with warrants to seize financial records, computer systems, and client files as part of their investigation into systematic fraud and corporate espionage. The restructuring that had eliminated my position was becoming the catalyst for comprehensive government scrutiny of Marcus's business practices. Special Agent David Chen from the FBI's White Collar Crime Division contacted me directly to discuss my role as a whistleblower in what had become one of the largest corporate fraud cases in Austin's history. Ms. Matthews, your documentation of systematic financial violations and corporate espionage has revealed patterns of criminal behavior that extend far beyond employment termination. We need your expertise to understand how these systems were operating and what damages may have occurred. Agent Chen, I've prepared comprehensive analysis of every regulatory violation, financial manipulation, and compliance failure that I was managing during my tenure as CFO. Marcus and Elena have been systematically defrauding clients, government agencies, and business partners while planning corporate espionage. The federal investigation revealed that Marcus's financial manipulations had affected not just Meridian Technologies, but multiple client companies who'd been charged for services that were never delivered or billed for projects that exceeded contracted scope. His just business practices had defrauded dozens of companies while violating numerous federal regulations. Elena's corporate espionage had been more systematic than even I'd realized. She'd been documenting not just our proprietary methodologies, but detailed client information, competitive analysis, and strategic plans that she'd been sharing with DataSync Solutions as part of a planned market takeover. By Friday, Marcus was facing federal charges for financial fraud, violation of fiduciary duty, and conspiracy to commit corporate espionage. Elena was charged with systematic intellectual property theft, violation of confidentiality agreements, and criminal conspiracy. DataSync Solutions was under investigation for orchestrating corporate espionage through strategic employee placement. But the criminal charges were just the beginning of Marcus's education about business consequences. The regulatory violations I'd documented had triggered immediate suspension of Meridian Technologies' business licenses, termination of client contracts, and comprehensive audit of 8 years of financial operations. Marcus thought he could eliminate me while keeping the business systems I'd built operational, I explained to Agent Chen during my final interview. What he didn't understand was that those systems required continuous management by someone who understood regulatory compliance. Without that management, his violations became immediately visible to government auditors. Within 2 weeks, Meridian Technologies had lost its business licenses, faced contract termination from every major client, and was being liquidated to pay regulatory fines and client restitution. The $50 million enterprise Marcus had built using my financial expertise was being systematically dismantled by the same regulatory agencies I'd been protecting him from. The just business decision to eliminate my position had become the catalyst for exposing 8 years of systematic fraud that destroyed not just Marcus's business, but his freedom, his professional reputation, and any possibility of rebuilding in the consulting industry. 6 months after Marcus's restructuring decision destroyed his business empire, I was sitting in my new corner office overlooking Austin's downtown district, reviewing client contracts for Matthews Consulting Solutions, the firm I'd built using the same methodologies and client relationships that Marcus had tried to steal, but this time with proper compliance and ethical business practices. The irony wasn't lost on me that Marcus's termination had provided the perfect opportunity to launch my own consulting firm using the expertise I developed at Meridian Technologies. My 8 years of financial management and compliance oversight had created a reputation that clients trusted more than Marcus's sales presentations. Miss Matthews, this is Robert Chang from Peterson Industries. We need to discuss transitioning our consulting relationship following the issues with Meridian Technologies. Your reputation for financial integrity is exactly what we need during this difficult period. Mr. Chang, I'd be happy to discuss how Matthews Consulting can provide the same strategic guidance you received previously, but with enhanced compliance oversight and transparent financial management. Within 3 months, I'd secured contracts with 80% of Meridian Technologies' former clients, all eager to work with someone they trusted to handle their digital transformation projects without the regulatory violations and ethical problems that had destroyed their previous consulting relationship. The federal investigation had actually enhanced my professional reputation by demonstrating that I'd been the ethical guardian preventing worse violations while Marcus pursued increasingly aggressive business practices. My willingness to report systematic fraud had positioned me as someone clients could trust with sensitive business operations. Matthews Consulting Solutions operated with the kind of transparency and compliance oversight that I'd always believed consulting firms should maintain. Every client contract included clear ethical guidelines, every financial transaction was properly documented, and every business practice was designed to exceed regulatory requirements rather than circumvent them. I'd also been invited to speak at industry conferences about ethical business practices in consulting and financial compliance as competitive advantage, presentations that detailed how proper regulatory oversight could actually improve client relationships and business sustainability. Voice becoming reflective. Marcus's termination letter had been intended to remove me from his business while he built something new with Elena. Instead, it had provided me with the motivation to build something better than anything we'd created together. A firm that prioritized ethical practices and regulatory compliance over aggressive growth and questionable financial management. I'd also received an unexpected call from Elena Rodriguez, who was facing significant legal consequences for her corporate espionage while being unable to use any of the intellectual property she'd stolen. Caroline, I know we had our differences, but I'm hoping you might consider providing testimony about my work at Meridian that could help with my legal situation. I never meant for things to go this far. Elena, I'll be happy to provide testimony about your systematic documentation of proprietary methodologies and client information while planning a competing business. I'm sure the court will find that information very relevant to your case. 2 years after Marcus's just business decision eliminated my position, I was reviewing expansion plans for Matthews Consulting Solutions' second office while preparing for a Harvard Business Review interview about building ethical consulting practices in competitive industries. The firm had grown to 30 employees, secured contracts with Fortune 500 companies, and earned recognition as one of Austin's most trusted business consulting firms. My focus on regulatory compliance and ethical practices had created a competitive advantage that larger firms couldn't match. Marcus had completed his federal prison sentence and was working in a junior accounting position, his consulting career permanently destroyed by his conviction for financial fraud and corporate espionage. Elena had served 18 months for intellectual property theft and was prohibited from working in consulting for 5 years. The Meridian Technologies case had become a business school case study about how regulatory violations could destroy established firms while creating opportunities for ethical competitors. My decision to report systematic fraud had influenced new industry standards for compliance oversight and whistleblower protection. I'd also established a consulting practice that specialized in helping companies implement ethical business practices and regulatory compliance systems that prevented the kind of violations that had destroyed Marcus's firm. Marcus had said eliminating my position was just business, while planning to steal the intellectual property and client relationships I'd built over 8 years. What he'd discovered was that some business decisions have consequences that extend far beyond restructuring charts, especially when you terminate someone who understands every regulatory vulnerability and compliance requirement that keeps a business operational. The termination letter that arrived on Friday at 4:47 p.m. had been intended to remove me from his business empire while he built something new with his corporate spy girlfriend. Instead, it had provided me with the perfect opportunity to demonstrate exactly what happened when you fired someone who understood how to build businesses properly, rather than just grow them aggressively. Marcus had said it was just business when he eliminated my position to make room for someone who was stealing our intellectual property. So I treated it like just business when I reported every regulatory violation and compliance failure that destroyed his company while building something better from the ethical foundation he'd abandoned. Sometimes the best revenge isn't personal, it's professional. It's using your expertise to build something legitimate and sustainable while ensuring that systematic fraud faces appropriate legal consequences. He'd said it was just business, so I'd ruined his business and built a better one. After all, I was exceptionally good at understanding how businesses should actually operate